Hey everyone, my name is PJ Hagerty. I work at IBM. In case you haven't heard of it, it's a tiny blue company. Started in the US, started working with AI very early on. I'm based in New York City. Today I'm going to be talking about artificial intelligence and ethics. So if you see a lot of things out on the internet that focus on this subject, they're often very black and white, good or bad. It's never easy to tell exactly what they're talking about, and we're going to try to break that down. Before getting into the finer points of the actual topic, I think it's always important that we understand what it is we're talking about. So we're going to hear a lot of words that are used interchangeably, a lot of times in the media, blog posts, tweets, skeets, wherever you're getting information. And a lot of times they shouldn't be used interchangeably. So in order to get started, I always like to set a bunch of definitions so we know what we're talking about. And the first one is, of course, AI. So artificial intelligence, the definition is, and this is my definition voice, the theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision-making, and translation between languages. Now, that's a pretty thick definition. For developers, AI involves designing coding systems, models that can process large amounts of data, adapt to new information, and improve performance over time. That's what we focus on. It often requires knowledge of algorithms, data structures, statistical methods, and domain-specific knowledge in order to make it useful for us so that we can have effective AI solutions. If we look at what's currently available, and there's a lot of things, I'm not going to list them all out, or at least what's being marketed as AI, which is even more, we can already see that there's a potential degradation in the actual definition of the true intent of what we mean by artificial intelligence. So we'll touch more on that as we move through the talk, but for now, we have a working understanding of what artificial intelligence is. So let's get into some of the deeper things. An algorithm. So, definition voice. An algorithm is a process or set of rules to be followed in calculations or other problem-solving operations, especially by a computer. This is often confused with AI. Algorithms are used to kind of standardize a set of behaviors that look at maybe a user's past history or something that you've done. Like, for example, when you go to an online shopping store that might be named after a rainforest, and you shop for a toilet seat because you need one toilet seat in your home. You just need one toilet seat, you need it one time. However, the algorithm says this person loves toilet seats. They've been looking at toilet seats for 2 hours just because you want to be comfy when you go to the bathroom. Chances are you are not a toilet seat enthusiast. But the algorithm behind what that shopping center is doing is saying, this person looked at it for a long time, they must like it, therefore I must present them with more toilet seat options constantly. Algorithms are not truly intelligent. They can't react, they can't really think. They're a simple set of rules with severe limits on how they work and how they respond. So essentially, an algorithm is like a step-by-step procedure designed to perform a specific task or solve a particular problem. Algorithms provide and respond to a clear sequence of instructions. They just run through it like a recipe. They don't really think about what they're doing. They just say, step 1 is done, step 2 is next. That's all there is to it. And that's why we get outcomes like constantly being presented about toilet seats. I'll stop talking about toilet seats in a minute. They're fundamental, though, to what we do in computer science and programming. We need algorithms. They serve as a blueprint for writing code, for building tests, for creating software. You clearly see that this differs from the description of artificial intelligence, where we're talking about something that can think and reason. And I'll get more into those things in a bit. To the use and development of computer systems that are able to learn and adapt without following explicit instructions by using algorithms and statistical models to analyze and draw inferences from patterns and data is known as machine learning. Now, this is the first thing you'll often hear interchangeably used with AI, machine learning. This is actually one of the foundational steps. At IBM, and I'm not going to toot IBM's horn too much here, but they do pay me to show up. At IBM, they've been working on machine learning since like the late 60s, early 70s. Like, this is not a new thing to us. Trying to teach a machine to act like a human being is something that we've been striving to do. I'm sure you've seen many videos from back in the day of Gary Kasparov playing chess against the big blue computer, or when Watson went on Jeopardy. Those are all examples of us trying to use machine learning algorithms to create an actual AI. Those things weren't true AI, but this is part of the AI journey. And it still very much is. It's also important to remember that machine learning is actually not exclusive to AI. It's anytime we're training a machine, we're creating algorithms to teach a machine to do a thing. The next thing we have is kind of the next step, and that's deep learning. So a deep learning model is a subset of machine learning that uses multi-layered neural networks to simulate the complex decision-making power of the human brain. Now, when I looked up this definition, it excited me because I was like, that's interesting. Biologists don't really know how the human brain works. Like, we know a lot about it, but not exactly how it works. And now we're teaching computers the half of what we know. Kind of an interesting idea. Some form of deep learning kind of powers most artificial intelligence. A lot of AI applications that are out there. And a lot of things that we're currently working with started in the deep learning era, which was very much in the early 2000s, where people started to build deep learning algorithms. This is commonly used at places like Twitter, Facebook, social media, and shopping websites and things like that. It's so close to AI without getting all the way there. It's like so close. Mostly because generally when it comes to deep learning, there's actually no interface. It has to attach itself to something else to be used. Some of the people use the concepts in deep learning and machine learning interchangeably. But again, it's more like a continuum. A great machine learning setup can be applied to a neural network and create a deep learning foundation. And we're not going to focus a lot on neural networks because that is a very complicated piece of computer science that we do not have 40 minutes to get into. So really just think of them as like computer systems and servers set up to mimic a human brain. It sounds complicated, but again, not our focus here. Next, we have a foundation model. So at its basis, a foundation model is used when creating a potential AI. This is how you start to build one. A foundation model is a machine learning or deep learning model that is trained on vast data sets, so it is applied across a wide range of use cases. So this generally sets our purpose for and creates like the set of data that the large language model is going to use, which we define later. And this is often the most dangerous part of AI. Many ethical questions need to be answered in the foundation model when it's being built. And we'll touch more on why that's important in just a little bit when we get through our definitions. So the next level, and this is where we start seeing things in the news. You'll notice that what I've mentioned so far, other than AI, you don't hear about them a lot anymore. And that's because they're so far in the background. They're not the sexy marketing, great, we can put that on a white paper and sell it kind of stuff that people care about. But when it comes to large language models, we're getting a lot closer. So LLMs are a category of foundation models trained on immense amounts of data, often literally billions of data points, making them capable of understanding and generating natural language and other types of content to perform a wide range of tasks. So the LLM is built on the foundation model. The foundation model is built on either a deep learning or machine learning model. We now are getting closer to what we see as AI. It's not, if you really think about it, an LLM is not that different than a database that you use for a standard application. It serves to provide all the data needed when leveraging an AI, but it does so on a massive scale. We're talking about, like, even the smaller models have billions of data points at this point. Finally, the other point, since all of that was about AI, this is the other point of the talk, ethics. This is much less of a technical principle, and it's also a lot harder to define. For this talk, we'll define ethics as moral principles governing behavior or the conducting of an activity. Unlike the other definitions, this one is completely fluid. Those definitions that we've had up to this point in time, solid, rock solid, they're not going to change. This one changes over time. And it changes because there's different ideas of what ethical behavior, ethical activity might be. They change with culture. They change with the organization you work with. When we apply ethics to technology, we need to consider outside social implications that might not be apparent. And this is where we begin. What is the ethical use of artificial intelligence? What does it mean to be a modern developer using these things and in the modern developer culture? How can we learn more about unethical AI and leverage only trustable sources? So, one of the first ethical issues that we face with AI is actually at the foundation and LLM level. When these models are created, there's an inherent bias. How many people know about inherent bias? You should all know about inherent bias because we all have them. And inherent bias can be something simple. I thought of this example when I was coming here. So I'm from New York City. I flew to Amsterdam and then flew to Vienna. And then I got in an Uber and I drove to my hotel. Well, I didn't drive. I sat in the back seat dozing off because I was severely jet lagged. But My bias, being from New York City, is that, of course, when I get to Eisenstadt, there's going to be plenty of Ubers. Why wouldn't there be? It's a city, right? Wrong. There's none. There's none. I walked around all day yesterday, which was great. Love the city. But like when I was like, all right, time to get back to my hotel because I'm 100% lost and I have a giant bag full of Fanta to bring back to the US because it's not the same there. And I found that I couldn't get an Uber to save my life. So I found a bank, got cash, and got a taxi. Because I'm American, we don't walk. It's not really our thing. But humans have bias. It's something that changes with each person. A lot of times it is unintentional or unconscious. These are things that started when you started realizing what the world was when you were just a baby. You saw through the eyes of your parents. Your parents already had bias based on the way they grew up. My parents had certain biases when I was growing up. And bias doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. My mom was a big hippie. She was very much into embrace everyone and love everything. It was a bit much. Especially in the 80s and 90s. But like, it was great to understand that's a bias she had, is that everything should be accepted all of the time. It's like, there should be guardrails on things, but I don't think she's expecting the world of today. But when you're building your model, your biases become built in. And there's a very easy example of this. How many people remember when there were some chatbots that were like released on Twitter, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, pre-COVID? Remember that world? And they almost immediately became super aggressive, harsh, offensive, misogynistic, bordering on fascist. Some crossed that border. This led them to being shut down and removed almost immediately. And part of that was because the base of the model that they were built on was just wrong. It didn't have any guardrails, didn't take anything into consideration. But how do we combat that when we're examining AI models to use or interact with? Tools like ChatGPT and others, they have guardrails to prevent abuse. When ChatGPT first came out, the 2.0 model, it didn't. You could do a lot of horrible things with it. And they were like, oh crap, we better fix that. So they did. They put on guardrails and said, listen, you can't do that. You can't say that. Those words aren't acceptable. I will not respond to that. And that's awesome. While it's open for everybody to use, there are still limits on what the model can do and how the model would be changed by interactions. If there are negative interactions, it will reject them. And with the interface, it'll decide what questions and how they should be posed. And that's important. One of the biggest ethical issues with AI is that AI can replace everyone and everything. So in the past few years, there have been so many ethical issues with workers threatening to be actually replaced by AI, replaced by automation. And while it's usually seen heavily in the creative industries like film, television, video games, we've also seen it at music streaming services and other tech companies where jobs previously done by humans were thought to be replaceable by AI. And I'll give you 2 personal examples. I used to work at Spotify. Sounds like one of the coolest companies in the world, right? And it was, till December 2023, when Daniel, the founder, decided to lay off 1,500 people at random, selected by AI, because he felt that everyone could be replaced by AI, so he figured a randomly generated group of people and then apply AI to that. So 5 months later, he went on Forbes and he was like, that was a huge mistake. Huge mistake. Did he hire us back? No, he did not. But he still at least recognized that he made a mistake. Another great example is all of the wonderful movies and things that came out. In the US and Hollywood specifically, there was a big writer's strike. The writers said, we don't want to do this. You're not paying us enough. You're using AI to take our words and change them and create different things. And if you notice, like over the past 3 or 4 years, some of the movies have been pretty terrible. I can't think of a good movie I've seen in a theater in quite a while. But that's because AI just isn't at the level that it can automate people out of jobs. They realized their mistake, they hired back the writers, things went on. So to say that trying to apply AI to everything and replace people, that's short-sighted. It's a misapplication of what AI can truly do. They're falling for something. They're falling for a big con. And that's that artificial intelligence, because the word intelligence is in it, it's that it's just as intelligent as a person. And to be honest, most humans aren't that smart, so if we're just basing it on our knowledge, not a very good place to start. So there's no sign that it's going to change. Just a few years ago, before AI became the buzzword on everybody's list, there was a movement towards low code and no code. People thought this was a new idea. How many of you are familiar with like no code and low code solutions? Does this sound new to you? Like it's kind of like, oh, low code and no code. That's so crazy, like the last 5 years. So I'm a little bit older and I started using Microsoft Access in 1995. Microsoft Access is a low-code solution. I'd argue it's a no-code solution. You can build applications that interact with a database, and you could do that in 1995. So this isn't new, it's just a new flavor. So don't get bogged down with the idea that AI will replace you. The human factor, especially in coding, is absolutely necessary. If anyone was in the talk by Ricardo from AWS earlier, you saw that there were so many errors he produced just trying to do a simple application with AI. It wasn't complicated, but the AI couldn't do it. And I honestly, my heart went out to him because doing a live demo like that, heartbreaking. A fair real-world example is a recent study that was done by the University of Washington and the University of Virginia. So after seeing a bunch of organizations make the attempt to apply AI to time series forecasting, so that's where you take a bunch of past data and try to look at what's going to happen in the future. You use this for the stock market, which is dead. Weather forecasting, figuring out, the futures of crops and things like that. And what they found was, more often than they succeeded at figuring out what the forecast should be, they failed. And it took so many, not only did it fail, but it took so many compute resources, so many things to get any kind of a response that they're wasting resources that other solutions could have successfully and more succinctly put together. So AI wasn't the answer for time series. We need to consider when we look at AI and LLMs, are they the right solution before we simply just slap and dive into everything? Think of it in the same way that we looked at cloud or containerization just a few years ago. Even things like Kubernetes were not considered solid enough. People took their time. They slowly moved into them. And going all the way back to the beginning of cloud in the early 2000s, when people were like, can I trust this Heroku? Can I trust this AWS to put all of my data and all of my production level code into? What happens if it disappears? People very slowly moved into it. So AI isn't gonna solve all the problems. It's not a golden hammer. Conversely, according to a study done by National University, 77% of businesses in general say they are using or exploring the use of AI for business activities. Does that number seem high to you? It doesn't? You don't think it does? Okay, we're gonna talk more about that later. I felt like when I was researching that seems insanely high to me. And this has something to do with what AI is and the perception of something that is marketed as AI. A lot of things that are marked artificial intelligence are actually just artificial. We come here to another ethical quandary, if you will. Marketing versus truth. Over the past few years, the term AI, and even the top-level domain, .ai, have been a major part of the marketing effort across the tech spectrum. Doesn't matter what you're building. People want to put .ai on things. They want to say, powered by AI. And it brings in massive investment if you're in the startup world. And they just kind of shuffle the truth and say, oh, this app is powered by AI. But what does that mean? And maybe that's part of the problem. There's so much hype. There's so much onus being put onto AI that it's not actually doing very much in the background. Not a whole lot of value there. If I'm a company or service and I claim that I'm using AI, I say, we use AI, and there's a big powered by AI thing at the bottom of my website, but we're only using an algorithm or maybe a chatbot for customer service, which is generally an algorithm and not actual AI, then, I'm going to get caught out. Developers are eventually going to see that, and they're going to know. They're going to say, this is bullshit. This is a lie. We don't want to deal with lies. We want to focus on what's going on. Doesn't mean that AI doesn't get used a lot, because it does. When it comes to things like enterprise and business uses of AI, things like code generation, testing, automation of DevOps practices, this is a much smaller portion of what is possible in the current environment. But if you use those things, it is very easy to slap it on and say we're powered by AI. I work at, giant corporation in the middle of nowhere. We make billions of dollars a year, and I have 2 developers using Copilot. Boom, powered by AI. That's really all it takes. They're not lying, technically. The interesting thing is also, I think some of these people are just doing exactly that. They believe they're powered by AI because they use another AI product that develops their product. To be consistent, adding the term AI to marketing materials and sales calls is just to generate business. That's 100% unethical. That is a ridiculous use and abuse of AI. Eventually, it's going to catch up to the organization. Customers aren't slow. They will figure it out. And someone's going to look under the bonnet someday, and they're going to see that it's all just duct tape and rubber bands. Hashtag thank you, internet. At the moment, the consumer market for AI seems huge, based largely on media coverage and exposure to the general public to things that are available and uses of the technology. While most of the activity of an AI goes on between the interface and the LLM, media and marketers and people looking for investment, they will have us believe that AI is absolutely everywhere. You can't go to an airport, you can't ride a subway in the US without seeing advertisements for how something's powered by AI. If we remember our earlier definitions though, there's a difference between an algorithm and a true AI. Most of the bots that we see, most of the activity we see are really just algorithm based, but they're advertised as AI simply because the responses in the interface make them look human-like. How many of you have ever interacted with like a customer service bot? How many of you have been successful interacting with a customer service bot? How many of you just sit there and type the word representative? Right, because the bot doesn't do anything. It's just an algorithm. It has this very small set of rules. And what it's going to do 9 times out of 10 is refer you to documentation or the website or some other place. It doesn't have the answer. It doesn't even know what an answer is. It just has responses. So things like ChatGPT and the image generator Midjourney are closer to consumer-facing AI. People use these pretty regularly. But they rely heavily on the user's ability to craft correct prompts. So this is why prompt engineering is now like a field unto itself. It's like a job you can find. These services can create very realistic responses and images, but they also require massively specific input. I don't have it in the slides, but there's actually just a post by a gentleman, I don't recall his name offhand, on LinkedIn today about vibe engineering versus vibe coding. And the difference that he points out is an engineer, when they write something, will be very specific. They'll say, here's my parameters, here's exactly what I want to build, here's what I need to do, this is the output I expect. And a vibe coder, and I hate this because it's semantics, but a vibe coder will be like, build me something cool, I want to make a lot of money. And yes, that's actually an excellent example of why prompt engineering is important. LLM interfaces are focused on using AI to automate and make work easier, but they have to know what the work is. These are the true workers when it comes to incorporating AI into business and tech companies, but they're usually the very smallest piece of the AI market currently. This is where things, and yes, this is a little bit of a thing, this is where things like Watson Code Assistant, GitHub Copilot come in. If you've used either of these, you know how far you need to go before the artificial intelligence is going to take over the world. Again, going back to Ricardo's talk, you saw how difficult it was. He's an expert. And you saw how difficult it was for him to get the specific application he was trying to build to work. It was tough. And I don't blame him. It's very difficult to craft prompts correctly, and he was trying to do it live. Then, of course, there are the issues of manipulation and abuse of AI consumer products. While this is not the focus of the talk, it is kind of important to note that it's part and parcel of our understanding of how technology can be used for harm and not good. There's always going to be bad actors, and in this case, I'm not talking about Ryan Reynolds. I think he's awesome. But I'm referring to nefarious users and abusers. And I mean, you're Python developers, you work in open source, you know how bad this is. I don't think I need to drill down on this. But these technological bad actors will find and exploit anything given the opportunity. Putting guardrails on the technology we create, like striving to remove bias, will help us to reduce the abuse factor. The biggest problem with manipulation is recently, these image generators have gotten better and more realistic. This is a picture of me from ChatGPT. I did this yesterday because my wife thought it would be funny. Given what you know about me, PJ Hagerty, make an image. That's the whole prompt. And it did that. And it's pretty good. My beard's a little bit whiter than AI thinks it is. I'll take it. I'm a little bit thinner. That's nice. Don't drink coffee, but I mean, you made an assumption. I'm a developer. I probably would have. Disturbingly close. Disturbingly close. Of the issues we've discussed thus far, the problem is often based on preconceived notions and personal biases. The general public, even if they're tech savvy, think that AI is much more advanced than it actually is. Artificial intelligence is not at a point where it can replace jobs, automate away art or creativity, or just take over any human interaction. How many of you use that AI or human chatbot thing? Have you checked that out? There's a chatbot, it's just a website. And what it does is it talks to you for about 3 minutes. It's a conversation with you and something else. And at the end it says, were you talking to a human or AI? The failure rate is about 50%. I've tried it. I failed, I think, 3 out of 4 times. I thought it was AI and it was actually a person. Lets me know that people are horrible. So we're not there where there's going to be this incredibly beneficial boost by using AI. And I say this even as AI has become so prevalent. I mean, in the United States, there's so many entertainment companies that are leveraging AI. And like I said, you can see the quality of what they're putting out is just not as good. This is the crux of ethical AI usage. It cannot be an all or nothing situation. AI requires a lot of resources at large scale, and it needs people with access to more vast resources who can reap the benefits. And when it's always people that have the vast resources and they're the only ones that can really reap the benefits, you have a severe inequity issue. You have a situation where only those who can afford to play, or only those who can afford to pay, get to play. And that's never good. Even the people creating the models that we're basing things on, the foundation models, the algorithms, the LLMs, they cannot be sure what the outcome is going to be. The idea is behind artificial intelligence is it can learn. It's what we call emergence. So emergence is when an AI actually starts to define things and reason without input. And it's a crazy thing to see. The model takes what it knows and it learns new things. This extrapolation is not unlike the way that we learn all of our notions and opinions. We start out, we're a baby, we're like, cool, things are blobs. Oh, things are people. And then there's other things that aren't people that are objects. Great. Oh, there's colors. Oh, sound and color are 2 different things. That's great. This all happens in the first 6 months that you're born. You're like, oh, these people who keep feeding me, awesome. I think I like them. I'm going to keep them around. We're going to call them mom and dad. Whatever. But you learn these things slowly over time. AI is no different. It can maybe do things a little bit faster than the human brain, but it's learning the same way that a child or a toddler learns. And just as I'm sure my parents agree, just as I like to say as a parent, when you're born, when that baby's born, you have no idea how that baby's going to turn out. They could be awesome or horrible. And I have 4 kids. I'll leave it at that. We're going to leave that right there. But this really underscores why we need to build things better from the beginning. If you are caring and loving and nurturing your child from the beginning, they're probably going to be a better person. A good example of this is facial recognition software. In the beginning, there was a cognitive bias in the software because most of the firms who were building it were run by white men exclusively. And they didn't think there was anything wrong with this. So they tested, they put it out, and they sold it to airlines and bathrooms so you could put your hands under the air dryer and the water and all that. Great, great, great. So here's the problem. When you're only white males, that means that your stuff doesn't work for anyone who's not white and not male. So it wouldn't recognize women. It wouldn't recognize people who were of color. It wouldn't recognize any of these things because all of the white males who made it didn't think about that in the first place. It's very similar to the way YouTube, when it first came out, they're like, yo, check this out. You can put videos online with no consideration for the fact that deaf people had no idea what was going on because there were no closed captions. They didn't fix that for like 10 years. This is a basic failure, a basic bias that leads us to understand the risk involved in building things. So we can look to philosophy and other areas of learning to find the place to bring the rules that we need for ethical AI engineering use. This is somewhat contested view as philosophy lacks an all-encompassing idea of what ethical behavior is, which is why that definition was so hard. I actually like to refer to, do we have any Isaac Asimov fans here? People who read Isaac Asimov? Okay, so you know what the 3 laws of robotics are? Okay, so I'll start with the first one. The 0th law of robotics is that a robot may not harm humanity or by inaction allow humanity to come to harm. Now, that's interesting because you'll notice I said the 0th law of the 3 laws of robotics, which means 2 things. Isaac Asimov understood off by 1 errors. 2, he understood that those 3 laws weren't all encompassing and had to continue to learn to create this fictional universe so that we all understood how it worked. And it's wild that even though that's fiction, it shows the understanding of ethical guidelines on a huge scale. And that's what we need to focus on when we build and use and create ethical AI. In every instance, every manifesto, every declaration about the ethical use of AI, from UNESCO to the intelligence community and governments to enterprise businesses, the phrase preservation of human rights and dignities can be found. That is our foundation. The very least we want to do is preserve human rights and dignity. Now, I understand that politically there's a lot of differences in what that definition means. I know what country I come from. But if we can teach our AI to be better than we are, that's awesome. So going back to the AI will take all the jobs concept. If we're concerned about rights and dignity, why don't we focus on building tools that are going to enhance the trades, enhance toil, or not enhance toil, but eliminate toil, reduce it, and not eliminate jobs and take them away from people. If we do this, we don't want to eradicate the workload. We just want to take away all the hard work. And this should be the cornerstone of what we build. And this is super easy to say, and it's not really that easy to do. Often companies get blinded by things like potential profits or cutting corners. It's our responsibility as both employees and citizens to keep things in line and call out problems when we see them. We need to blow whistles. We need to shout about it. Whatever needs to be done. If you need to, you go to a protest, you throw up a sign. If you see something being done in a non-ethical way, you need to say something. And you need to keep saying something until the person who can fix it gets things done, even if it's not you. One of the things that we learned from earlier in the chat was that from those early chatbots that were based on AI is that with no guardrails, things develop quickly. So I mentioned the chatbots, but the one I specifically want to focus on is Tay. Do we remember Tay? Tay was Microsoft's chatbot that it put out on Twitter. 24 hours. 24 hours because they based most of its learning on Reddit. That's psychotic. And that's actually what happened. A lot of people were feeding it bad information for the lulz because it was the internet and it's so fun. But like Tay had a fairly robust technical model, but not a very good foundational model. And that was the thing. It could talk like a human. It seemed like you were interacting with, and why they picked a 14-year-old teenage girl, I'll never know. But it seemed like this was a conversation you could have until the 24 hours went by and they realized it was a nightmare. More modern models are building safe user experiences. And while there are always ways around safety measures, they're in place to ensure that no one is unintentionally harmed. You want to build as many guardrails around the LLMs and the AI that you use to make sure no one is unintentionally harmed. And that's tough because it's unintentional. Learning about biases helps us with that. Testing and retesting systems, taking advantage of AI and LLMs can help us build more safety-centric applications, more robust patterns of building. The more we share the knowledge on how to build these boundaries, the more likely we are to pass the knowledge on and maintain that high safety standard. And that's the key. This is where the community needs to evolve and learn. We need to understand that, listen, AI is here. It's going to be used. Let's try to at least use it in a good way. And we have to look at like what techniques can we apply and what do we need to learn to make these robust and safe foundation models, LLMs and AI. So the first thing is always accountability. Accountability is crucial when dealing with technology. And anyone who tells you that it's not is probably an insane startup person from Silicon Valley who may or may not own a social media platform. We need to put in mechanisms to ensure responsibility and accountability for AI systems and their outcomes. Then there's another thing. And this isn't even really a word, but it's been thrown around in the AI and data science world for a while. Auditability. This is the assessment of algorithms, data models, and design process that also plays a key part in accountability. So the idea here is you have to open it up. You have to keep it open source to say, if there's something that needs to be fixed, we need to know. These languages need to learn. These AI need to understand. And if they don't, we need to take them offline and fix them until they do. In order to make a system truly accountable, it must be consistently and fairly reviewed both internally at the company you work for and by third parties. That means not just end users, but there needs to be some sort of governing body that says these are the rules, you can't break them. Here's where much of the developer, testing, and end user community takes the stage. It's our opportunity to actually get involved. Ensuring AI is accountable will largely be people stretching its boundaries, trying to push it, trying to break its capabilities beyond what the foundation model called for. A sound AI governance strategy can also help companies minimize risk while strengthening the ability to meet those ethical principles in government regulation. And these are often not the same thing. So things like thoughtful data curation should be part of the responsible development of an AI system. There are products, and I'm going to say, I got to say the thing because they paid me to say the thing. AI governance like IBM's WatsonX.governance is available as a starting point to say, I have this model, and I want to make sure that my model is in line with modern concepts of ethical AI building. And it will look at your model and say, this is great, this is not, this is okay, but could be better. It's a little more robust than that, but I'm giving you a general idea. Governance here is an entire subject section of the artificial intelligence community. Like, there are people who just focus on governance. They do nothing but write code for guardrails and rules and things like that. Now, the key thing to remember is I mentioned government regulations. Most governments are like at least 10 to 15 years behind what we do on a daily basis. They have no idea how to use these things. It's interesting because I saw an article this morning where someone actually did a test of whether you could write the United States tariffs policy using ChatGPT. And they did, and it looked exactly the same, which leads to an interesting ethical conundrum of who the hell is in charge of that country and why aren't we taking it over? But we need to remember that expecting a government agency or a government body to come in and say, we'll fix this. There's something messed up, we'll fix this. They don't really understand what's going on, so we can't depend on that. And remember, it's not a dichotomy of right or wrong. It's a set of guidelines that help us determine what is appropriate and what is beneficial to the community at large. So all the philosophy and ethics, all this would be relatively pointless if there weren't things around it. I mentioned WatsonX.governance. There's also AI Fairness 360. This is a comprehensive open source toolkit designed to help developers detect, understand, and mitigate bias in machine learning models. It includes fairness metrics so that it understands how fair a data set could be, and a range of algorithms to reduce bias in predictions. Now you'll notice that the AI Fairness 360 thing, actually the product actually uses algorithms and not AI to figure out if AI is more biased than the algorithm. It was interesting because, again, an algorithm is just a set of rules. And if you're following the rules, then you get a good grade. There's also a thing called IBM Granite Guardian, and this is more for the prompt engineering side. This allows you to check if prompts that your LLM allows are ethical. And even though it's called Granite Guardian, it can use any LLM. It doesn't have to be Granite. Don't let the name fool you. We also all kind of need to know a little bit about what's going on in the world. So like, we need to know ethical and legal things around data protection. GDPR being the biggest and most important one. It's a big deal. I think we're all familiar with that. There's also a thing called the CCPA, which is the California Consumer Privacy Act. And these can help you, like you can read these, they're fairly readable. There are TLDR versions of these things. And they help you to get inside the legal and privacy implications of building and leveraging LLMs and AI. The simple way to ensure this is there's actually a product on the market called ARX, A-R-X. And what this does is it helps you to anonymize and pseudonymize, that's not an easy word, personal data. So when you're entering your data into the LLM, when you're saying, I want to use this set of data to teach my LLM what to do, it can say, okay, whoa, there's like personal information. This is PJ Hagerty. Why does it say PJ Hagerty? What is he doing in here? Get rid of that. Or change the name to, that's what pseudonymize means. It means to take personal information and change it so it's no longer a valid piece of personal information. And again, this is to ensure that your data is clear, it's clean, and it can't be tracked back to individual people. ARC also helps us build, find, and use data sets with greater diversity to help avoid that bias issue, like with the facial recognition software. We also need to be concerned about hallucination. How many of you have heard about hallucination? So hallucination is exactly what happened in Ricardo's talk. He said, I would like this thing. I'm building this Python app. I would like this thing. And it was like, bro, I totally got this thing for you. It's going to work. Don't worry about it. It's totally fine. It's going to work. Don't worry about it. Then he said, Python app.py, and it didn't work because the AI actually hallucinated that it had built valid code. Didn't test it, or maybe it did in its own weird way. AI hallucination is not really all that different from the concept of hallucination. And I always like to use the example of Copilot here. Like, Copilot is awesome, but hallucination can totally become an issue with Copilot. And I know this because Copilot bases all of its information on public repos in GitHub. I have so much crap code in GitHub, like absolute garbage, doesn't work, no tests. Just put it up there because I want it off my machine, whatever. It's like the worst Stack Overflow experience you can ever possibly get. Copilot can be really bad. It continues to improve. It continues to look at things and go like, okay, that's good code. That's PJ's bad code. We're ignoring that again. But I'm not saying you shouldn't use it, but just understand that you have to be aware of what you're using. Your prompts have to be great. Your inputs have to be great so the output can be great. And practical steps can be taken to avoid this with things like fine-tuning on domain-specific knowledge, incorporating fact-checking. using confidence scoring, getting humans to review your data set, and designing systems for specific tasks. So one of the big things in AI right now is being able to take an LLM from like Hugging Face or Olama or something like that, put it right on your computer. This is not possible even like a year ago, like unless you had a super massive computer, but definitely not a laptop. Definitely not like a MacBook Air or like a notebook. Wasn't going to work. Now I can actually take the Granite 3.2 model and run it on my machine and have it do 11 different things. And it's absolutely amazing. And it's still an 8 billion parameter model, but it's possible. So practical steps. There's also this new thing. This is a fairly recent development called unlearning, large language model unlearning. And this is centered around the idea that, yes, there are biases, but yes, we need to get to production at some point in time. What if we put things into production, but then we have a way to actually untrain the model and say that thing that you learned, either from user input or because of a bias that you coded into the LLM, what if we said you don't learn that anymore? Like suddenly you don't know that. You know why you learned it. It's like saying, yes, I went to school and I learned calculus. Can you tell me about it? Nope. But I know it's important. That's exactly how learning works. This is still a very nascent thing. It's still in its infancy. So we're trying to get more of these things into AI so that we can have it be more ethical, remove more of those biases, remove more of those fragile structures, remove more of those potential points of incursion so that people can't come in and ruin things again. We don't want more Tay. We don't want more things like that on the internet. We want solid structures. So as we take a look at some of the resources that I've mentioned, let me conclude with some thoughts. The intersection of AI and ethics is more critical now than ever as AI systems become more and more integrated into our daily lives. How many of you have ChatGPT or Genesis on your phone? Or whatever the Google, Gemini, Genesis. I think Genesis is when you search, Gemini is on your phone. Yeah, it's not that uncommon to have. I use it all the time. Mostly because I travel a lot and I don't have anybody else to talk to. It's very lonely. But if we look at these things that we've explored, like AI bias, and if we leave that unchecked, it can amplify things like inequality, and it can perpetuate harm. It can toss an entire election in a country. A lot of that was based on information that was pushed out by AI bots on Facebook. Something like, I think it's 20 or 25% of the users on Facebook aren't real. Like, that's crazy. But because they didn't have enough people interacting on Facebook anymore, they thought that was the answer. I don't think it was. That led to inequality. That led to perpetual harm. It also led to a lot of people's information getting stolen. So the incorrect application of AI technologies raises further concerns about unintended consequences, which underscores why AI ethics is not just a theoretical debate. This isn't just something to talk about over coffee. This is a practical necessity. This is something we need to do. Current ethical challenges such as fairness, transparency, accountability, these demand that we implement rigorous standards and frameworks to ensure responsible AI development. We also discussed the importance of accountability and auditability in AI systems. This ensures that the system can be monitored and evaluated for ethical compliance outside of the organization that's actually building it. Governance frameworks and oversight structures, equally essential, provide a roadmap for responsible AI deployment across industries. Finally, we touched on some of the tools for developers, and they're all here, to help us guide AI uses. These tools are indispensable for supporting ethical decision-making, minimizing risks, and ensuring that AI technologies benefit all of society. AI is coming to all parts of the world. Some of you might already be using AI tools in work. If we can better understand how to ethically use these things, then there's an improved chance that we're going to deliver better tools and better applications to our users. And let's face it, that's what our job is. We build applications. We build things that our users can find useful. The very definition of technology is the use of a tool to make life easier for humans. Like, I mean, that kind of goes unsaid, but it's supposed to be easier for humans, not for the market, not for the business, but for individual humans to use and make their lives easier. In essence, ethical AI is not just about preventing harm. It's about actively creating systems that are just, equitable, and aligned with human values. The responsibility to uphold these principles lies with every single one of us involved in AI development, from policymakers to developers, ensuring that technology serves the broader good. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
First question to you. When did you enter the workforce?
Who?
You.
When did I enter the workforce?
Yeah. Was it in 1990s?
In technology or in general?
In general.
I had my first job when I was 7 years old.
Okay.
So it was the 1980s.
Okay.
I scraped grills at a Greek restaurant.
But you mentioned that you started using Microsoft Access in 1995.
Oh, no, I used it before then, but I didn't really, like we used it in school, but we didn't really realize what it could do until I was a little bit older.
Okay.
But yeah, that's when I started working at an office job and realized, like, hey, you could do a lot with Access.
Then my question, it's just a context. My question is, do you see similarities between dot-com bubble and what we have now in the world of
100%.
AI? Okay.
100%.
So it's the same. It's like the TV with the internet from the 90s.
Yeah. When TV with internet already built in was like the biggest thing in the world, and then most people realized, like, I don't want this, I don't need this, and it's actually problematic because people can like get into my TV remotely. It's kind of a bad thing. But yeah, I do see this as a bubble. I think that it rides the wave that was created by things like crypto and blockchain just a few years ago, where everyone was like, this is going to change the world. Let's talk about it constantly. And it's like, did it do anything? No. It was all just a big show so some rich people could make more money. I feel like that's where we're at, but I think AI, unlike most of the crypto world, has a purpose, and there's something you can do with it. But maybe like the dot-com bubble, it has to pop first, and then we realize where the useful bits fell down.
So I have a question concerning the biases, because we have seen, of course, there are models which have biases, and eventually we found out they are not just straight white dudes and other people than that as well. But what about the biases we are not even aware of yet? Any idea how we should tackle those?
I mean, that's the hard part. Like, I mean, this is what we call unconscious bias or unintended bias. The biggest thing is, I mean, as an individual, you need to look inside yourself and say, what biases do I have? When I think of something like my Uber example, something simple, it's not harmful to anyone. But at the same time, I had a bias of expecting there to be plentiful Ubers everywhere I go. That's because in my experience, there are plentiful Ubers everywhere I go. New York City, it's a whole place unto itself. But it's something you have to analyze constantly. And I think when it comes to AI, that's why we need things. They're learning, like I mentioned, they're learning like toddlers. And so when we see something like that, we need to either remove the bias or find a way for it to unlearn the bias. So it's going to be a constant process. It's not like, okay, cool, so I've removed all my biases. I'm good. Everything moved on. I'm no longer a racist misogynist. My life is perfect. Thank you very much. It's constant learning, constant, and like you said, things are always changing. Like our understanding of society, our understanding of people's lifestyles, our understanding of technology, all of it's changing constantly, and it always introduces new bias and maybe gets rid of old bias. Maybe the new bias is a little bit better, but we need to continue that journey. And with AI, we need to teach it to unlearn the things that it learns when it's necessary.
So just like it's nice that we would publish the model structure and the weights of the LLMs that we have, another thing that is, in my opinion, even more important is the training code. Because all of the biases that the model has and everything that it does basically just comes from the prior. And it's really important to where you get that prior. But of course, companies wouldn't do that because they've basically, in order to get to this point where you have all the data to train, they've basically violated every IP protection rights that humans ever came up with, so they wouldn't do it, of course. But I think that's even more important than just the model structure and the weights. Absolutely.
You're absolutely right. I would disagree on one point, though. A few weeks ago, the biggest thing in the news for AI was DeepSeek. DeepSeek was like, oh my God, it's so fast, it's so amazing, it has so many data points, and it's awesome. And then you realize it was trained on proprietary information that had no right to learn. Now, all of the capabilities that DeepSeek had, the IBM Granite model also had, but we had not released it because we had not certified that it was governed. We had not audited it to make sure that we weren't using proprietary information. We wanted to make sure we were 100% there. And believe me, even as an IBM employee, we don't always do the right thing. We're a business. We're trying to make money. But when it comes to AI, we want it to be as close to perfect as we can get. We know that it's not perfect, but we'd rather take our time and release late and not get the big news cycle than release something like DeepSeek that is deeply concerning. And you have to worry about it because where did it get its information from? Which I think I remember seeing a comic that it was like a picture of a fisherman, and he's like catching a fish out of the basket, and it's like DeepSeek is the fisherman getting the fish out of the basket, and ChatGPT is getting the fish out of the water, and the water says everybody's information. So it's like it's a continuum. Like these people there's definitely non-ethical ways of building your data set.
I think it's even the only way.
It's not.
It's currently done.
It's not. There's so much publicly available, non-proprietary, non-PII, no personal information necessary ways to build an LLM. You know, I was having like just an interesting discussion with a colleague of mine. And we were talking about like, what if you built a spiritual AI? And he said, like, what do you mean? I said, you take the Bible, the Quran, every religious text, the text of Buddhism, the Tao Te Ching, all of it. You teach it to an LLM, nothing else. That's the only context it has. Then you give it a chat interface and ask people to ask it spiritual questions. Would it answer with science? No. Would it answer correctly? Define correctly. Would it answer ethically? Probably, because even though I'm not a religious person, I feel like most religions have some sort of ethical situation going on. That's the whole point of them. But that's all public information. That's not proprietary at all. And there's lots of LLMs out there that actually do that. I actually just built one. I used the Granite model, but I erased it and I took it and I only taught it information about Dungeons and Dragons. That's all it knew. From the original box set to 5th edition. And so knowing only that, I built a little tool so you could be like, all right, so how does grapple work? I don't understand how grapple works. What does it mean to have range? What is it, like all these D&D questions that often come up during a D&D session. And it was fine because it wasn't proprietary information. I had permission to use it because we're IBM, we have partnerships with everybody. But like, it's easy to say, a lot of that is public information. Let me just teach it what public information is available and make it easier. But then the question rises, so what's the difference between that and a Google search? Other than there's no advertisements on the thing that I learned. And I'm not going to look at you and try to feed you ads based on what you've looked up before. So it is tough. That is a major ethical question is where are we getting the information from and how easy is it to find scrub data sets or open data sets? And I think the open source movement is really going to move towards that.
Just one more question and then I think we have to close.
Thank you. Do you believe there is a lack of legislation around AI?
I'm sorry?
Do you believe there is a lack of legislation around AI?
Legislation. Always the tough questions. How to put this in a way that isn't going to get me fired? Legislation, like I said, governments are always late in picking this stuff up. There definitely is a lack of legislation. There's no legislation almost. But in the same way that, you know, when the internet became a thing that was in everyone's home in the 1990s, they didn't know what to do when a kid might use their access to the internet to steal T1 lines from the university so they get really awesome modem speeds. And then they have a talk with the FBI even though they're only 14. But there was no law. How do they figure that out? What's the consequence? Well, there's no law. So they write a law, but that law is already 5 years out of date. I think that well, it might not be legislation for the AI itself. What we need is legislation for companies that are going to use and abuse AI. I think that's more necessary and that's more short-term possible.
We have to close here because the next speaker also wants some time to set up. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.